Right now, Apple's making some disruptive laptops. So if you're gonna make a laptop more expensive than, say, an M2 Macbook Air, it needs to be unique. And LG thinks they've done it with the new 16-inch LG Gram. Now, if you're thinking this is just another LG Gram, hang in there. I'll get to the speed test in just a minute, but let's start off with the bread and butter of this laptop. As the name suggests, it's one of the lightest laptops I've ever held, and it boasts a high-resolution 16-inch touchscreen, surprisingly mechanical keys, impressive new software, and of course an absolute powerhouse under the hood, all in less than 3.26 pounds. But is all of this too good to be true? Alright, so the 2-in-1 16-inch LG Gram from 2022 is just such an incredibly light laptop. We're going to talk a lot about what this laptop does, but you can't talk about this without talking about the weight. Like, it just feels like a Hollywood prop or something, but it's actually a real laptop. It weighs 3.26 pounds, as I said before, and for reference, because you might not know exactly how many pounds a laptop is, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is 4.8 pounds. So that's 47% heavier. This really is a very, very light laptop. But in that, you're also getting some pretty impressive specs. We've got really thin bezels all the way around the display, and we have a pretty impressive battery as well. I thought the battery for sure would be something they cut back on. They claim to have 18.5 hours of video playback with this. For my testing, I was getting closer to about 9 hours, but before you get too shocked, I was having the specs pretty stacked there, right? I had full brightness, I had full volume, I had it in performance mode with a high fan, and I was still getting about 9 hours of battery life, which I thought was fairly impressive. Now, when you first pick up this laptop, you're probably going to think it's plastic, but it's actually not plastic. Despite being so lightweight and having some flex to it, it's actually a magnesium alloy body. The entire thing everywhere is all magnesium alloy, so it's very strong and very light, and it actually passed military-grade durability testing, which is good to know because how thin and light this thing is when you first feel it, you would assume they maybe compromised the durability. That's actually not the case. Now, opening it up, you'll see that, like I said, we have thin bezels all the way around the display. It's a 16:10 display. Laptops are really starting to opt for the taller displays rather than the classic 16:9, so I'm happy about that. It's also 2560 by 1600, so not quite a 4K display, but better than 1080p. The display, I found, is bright enough in most situations. There definitely can be a glare, of course. It's not a really matte display, but great color, really vibrant details in here, and overall a pretty solid display, especially for something this thin and light. Looking at the rest of the laptop, we'll get to the keyboard in a second, because I actually really like this keyboard. On the left side, we have two USB Type-C ports. They're actually Thunderbolt ports, so that's great for connecting like a 5K display if you have one, or power, or whatever you want to connect to those. And we also have a classic headphone jack. One thing I'll note about the USB Type-C port is I wish they had another one on the right side so you could charge either on the left or the right side, depending on like where the nearest outlet is, for example. Looking over on the right side, we've got a micro SD card slot, not regular SD, but micro, still better than nothing. We have a power button, which is strange because there's a power button on the keyboard. I'll explain why that is. And we have a little flap right here that is actually a USB Type-A port. Now, it's kind of weird that they have this little flap because technically the body is thick enough to have a USB Type-A, but they wanted to put a chamfer on the bottom to give you an illusion of a thinner laptop. And so in order to do that, they had to put a little flap to actually get a USB Type-A on there. I'm glad they went the extra mile to get Type-A. It's something I wish I had on my MacBook Pro, but the flap's just kind of weird. Now, I mentioned that power button on the right side was also kind of strange. The reason for that is because you also have a power button on the keyboard. That's why I thought it was strange. Now, I'll explain why they did that. They did that because you're not always going to have the keyboard facing you. Sometimes they expect you to flip it into tablet mode, as you can see right here. And wow, that just did a really weird thing there. Flip it into tablet mode, and so then you have a button on the side to turn this on and off, and of course Face ID to sign in. It does come with a pen, a little stylus pen in the box. And so this pen, they've got some new apps on here for notes and things like that. I always just use OneNote. I think that's easier. It feels like a pretty decent pen though. There's two buttons on here. One of them helps you erase and you can program them however you want. And like I said, the pen, it's something that I think, depending on what you're using the laptop for, I don't know. I usually don't use pens. I don't find them to be especially useful, mainly because I travel with the laptop and there's just nowhere to store the pen. Like if they had a silo in the side, I would use a pen all the time, but there's not one, so I don't use the pen that much. Now, I believe that the power button is supposed to double as a fingerprint sensor. I'm not positive, but that's what they've kind of always done with the LG Gram. And with this one, if you go into your settings on Windows, if you just go into your biometrics, there is no fingerprint sensor detected. So it's not a fingerprint sensor, or at least mine's not a fingerprint sensor, or maybe it is and it's just not working as one right now. My testing says no fingerprint sensor. Now, getting into the keyboard itself. It's backlit, that's great, I love to see that, and this has the most mechanical keys I've seen on any laptop in recent past. The keyboard here is incredibly mechanical, and typing on it is not only loud, but also has a lot of travel, and you have to push a little bit harder. There's definitely a lot more resistance than most other laptops out there, which makes it feel more like the big classic mechanical keyboards that a lot of people might be used to from the 90s or the early 2000s, and some people really love that. I'm used to a slightly slimmer, more sleek keyboard, but getting used to this after using it for just about a week now, I actually really like this keyboard. It feels like a really nice, solid keyboard, which again, I was surprised by given how thin and light this laptop is. But keep in mind, they're a little bit loud. So if you're in a coffee shop, you might be a little bit, I don't know, loud. What is not as loud, however, is actually the speakers. Now, the speakers you'll see are not showing anywhere in the front. They're actually side firing, and they have some bottom firing ones on the bottom, like center. So we'll actually get into a speaker test in a second, but I mean, they do a good enough job. They're passable, but it's not going to be something that you want to blast music and kind of fill your whole office space with. All right, now for a speaker test.
So it's been 1 month since Sony launched their new flagship headphones, the 1000X Mark Vs.
Bass could be a little better.
There was a lot of excitement, a lot of claims that these are the best.
It's definitely passable.
The best wireless headphones you can buy, but now that it's been a month, I want to talk about what is actually...
So the speakers are passable. I think they could have been a little bit better, but what is very impressive on here is that we're finally moving to a 1080p webcam. So many laptops out there, I don't know why they don't have a 1080p webcam. It's such an easy thing to add. Phones have had it for like a decade now. All right, so this is a video test with the LG Gram. Finally, we have a 1080p webcam on here. Honestly, it looks pretty good. We've got a lot of saturation. My hat looks pretty blue, but let me know how this sounds. Also, there's a lot of background noise, specifically this guy right here. He's a really old dog, and so we'll see if this microphone cuts out his heavy breathing. You also have some really cool software in here, like AI background blocking with the microphone, and more things we'll talk about when we get into the software. But now let's talk about the internals of this laptop. Now, I'm not going to dive through all the acronyms like the LP, DDR5 RAM, and Wi-Fi 6E, blah, 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 right? I'm going to talk about this just from a practical standpoint. So this has an Intel i7 processor. It's a 1260p, which means it has 12 cores and 16 processors. For reference, a lot of similar i7 laptops that were in the similar price range from a year or two ago would have 4 cores and 8 logical processors. This has 12 and 16. So as you might guess, this should be performing really well, and the Geekbench scores show it. This was getting 1735 in a single score and 9763 in the multi-core score. That was when I had it plugged in performance mode, which is obviously the best way to test this. But compared to the Surface Laptop 4, the Galaxy Book Pro, and even the M2 Macbook Pro, this beat all of them, only losing to the M1 Max MacBook Pro. And full disclaimer, the M2 Macbook Air, I don't actually have one. That's based on some testing I saw online from Mr. Macintosh on Twitter. So thanks for those numbers. Now, this was the Geekbench 5 test, which is by no means a perfect test. It's synthetic, of course, but for my own testing, it was a really fast laptop. Now, keep in mind, this was plugged in performance mode. If you unplug it, if you turn the fan down to a lower mode, it's gonna be a little bit slower, but it's still a really fast laptop. Like, you're not gonna notice it's slower unless you're working on something high-end, like editing a video or something like that. Now, I would say that for most like students or anybody looking for high-end productivity, if you're doing a lot of spreadsheets, multitasking, if you travel, or even most video editing would be really honestly pretty impressive with this laptop, especially with that speed and especially with the lightweight design. But LG wants to give you a little bit more with that. They're giving you a lot of software on here, which is both good and bad. Starting off with the bad, it comes off with some bloatware. Like, I don't know why, for example, this has Disney Plus on here. Why does it have things pre-installed like that? I would say probably because Disney Plus has some kind of deal with LG, and that's a way to subsidize a laptop. It's already a pretty expensive laptop, so I wish they wouldn't put that software on here. Additionally, it does have things like Amazon Alexa, which, I don't know, if you want that, cool. I'm not a big fan of Alexa on my laptop, so I always just disable that anyway. But some software that is useful is the LG Smart Assistant. Now, I know that you can already go into settings and do a lot of this there, but having it in a more kind of graphical interface that's easier to use, I think is really convenient. So if you just open this, there's a lot of really useful things such as presets. If you go to like study or cinema or work mode, it'll change like the white balance, it'll change the fan speed, it'll change everything. You've got quick settings here, like you can turn on security mode, you can turn the webcam and the mic on or off. You can have instant booting, which is when you just open up the laptop. Even if it's off, it'll turn back on. And of course, we've got other things like keyboard settings on here. We've got power saving on here, display settings, and of course that AI noise canceling that I mentioned when you're talking about the webcam. And speaking of the webcam, LG also has LG Glance on here, which is great for privacy as well as other like eye tracking stuff. And so essentially this means if you're looking at your laptop, it's going to show you things. If you glance away, it can hide them. If you have multiple displays, you can look at one and then look at the other and it can move it over for you. Like some really pretty advanced and impressive things that I don't personally use or think I need, but you know what, maybe I'm just getting old. Maybe that's something that is really cool and really powerful. I do, however, recommend, as far as speed goes on this laptop, it's fast, but something I recommend when you're booting it up, of course, the first time you're gonna have updates and stuff, right? But I recommend going into Task Manager and turning off a lot of the crap that's going to turn on whenever you boot up. From McAfee on here to PC Mover pop-up to Microsoft Teams, there's a lot of junk that just bloats it and slows it down on boot up. Now, even though this laptop is really, really impressive overall, and I'll talk about some more impressive things in a second, not everything is good. So let's dig into some of the ways that this might be too good to be true and some of the drawbacks that kind of are inherent compromises when you make a light laptop of this size. The first one is that although the screen is massive and it looks really nice, there's definitely no shortage of screen wobble. If you move your table around at all, if you're typing, or the worst that I found is if you have your laptop up on like a riser, like I usually have a stand so it's off the table, and if you're not using a separate keyboard, so if you're typing on here, this thing wobbles around so much. Secondly, it's kind of a total fingerprint magnet. As you can see see if I can show that on the camera right there, total fingerprint magnet. So that's actually the first way that I knew that this was not plastic. I mean, some plastic can be fingerprint magnet, don't get me wrong, but this is like a total metal property there. I don't know, if you clean it frequently, it's not an issue. If you cover it with stickers, not an issue. And I would much rather have this than a plastic body, but be warned, fingerprints are going to be there. Additionally, you do have a lot of flex with this, which again is kind of a good thing. Like it's flexible, which is better than being brittle and breaking. So this is pretty durable. You can bend it without actually breaking it, but it takes away from the premium feel. Like having something that flexes this much makes you feel like you don't have an expensive laptop, which ties me into the last con. This is an expensive laptop. So it's going to outprice a lot of people out there. But if you're looking to spend the money, it's definitely a total powerhouse that's very, very lightweight, great for students, great for travel, like I said, and great for a lot of everyday use. And getting into some of the pros with this laptop, of course, as the name suggests, it's one of the lightest 16-inch laptops out there. That's going to be great for slipping in your backpack. You don't realize you even have it if you're traveling on a plane. It takes up so much less space. It weighs almost nothing. And it's really nice to not have a bulky laptop. It's incredibly fast. With the new Intel processor on here, I was amazed at how much better this was than previous models from Intel i7 in a laptop like this. The flexibility, as I said on here, kind of bending, I'm going to chalk that up as a pro, even though it's kind of weird and I don't particularly enjoy that, but it is good for durability. Of course, we do have that military grade standard durability on here, and even though I've only used this one for a week, my wife's had the last year's model of this for the past year, and it's still doing very, very well. So who is this laptop really for? I think because it's such a lightweight design, it's going to be for anybody that travels a lot and has it on their back a lot, but doesn't want to compromise on the size of their display. So if you're a student and you have enough money to buy it, then it's going to be a great device to bring to class because you're always carrying it around on your back and it's super lightweight. Similarly, anybody who travels a lot, whether that's just you like to walk to work or if you like to go down to a local coffee shop, or if you're literally traveling further and you're going on planes and trains and stuff like that, and you always have this on your back, then a lightweight laptop with a large display gives you productivity without giving you a ton of weight. But this laptop is not for two main groups of people. One of them, of course, being anybody on a tight budget, and the second one being anybody who maybe is more of an intense gamer. This is a fast laptop, but as far as the graphics performance goes, it's maybe not going to be up to your standards, and the speakers are not necessarily the best. But that's been it. That's my take on the LG Gram 2022. Overall, an impressive laptop, but some compromises that come with a larger, very lightweight design. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think of this laptop and if you consider buying it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.